Hahu Gavra, there was a person, the Afkid Kipi, who deposited rings, Gabe Chavre, by his friend. Amarle, he said to him, meaning the owner of the rings, said to the watchman who was watching the rings, Havli Kipi, give me my rings. Amarle, he said back to him, the watchman said back to the owner, Lo Yadana Hechius Vinhu, I don't know where I put them. Asalakameh Rav Nachman, he came in front of Rav Nachman. The owner of the rings took the watchman to Rav Nachman to get a ruling from him. Amarle, Rav Nachman said to him, Kol lo yadana pshiyusahi. All I don't knows are negligence. If you say, I don't know what happened to it, that's considered negligence. Zil shlim, go and pay. Lo shilem, he didn't pay. Azal Rav Nachman went. Agvela apadne mine, he seized his palace from him. Lesof ishtakech kipi, in the end the rings were found. Ve'aikor, and they went up in value. Rav Nachman said, Hadri kipi lemarayu, return the rings to their owner. Vehadra apadna lemara, and return the palace to its owner. Amar Rava said, Havayasvina kamed Rav Nachman, I was sitting in front of Rav Nachman, Upirkin Hamafkid Hava, and it was the perek of Hamafkid that we were learning. Ve'amrile, and I said to him the following question, Shilem v'lo rotza lishava. He pays and he doesn't want to swear. This is a quote of the first Mishnah of Hamafkid that we learned at the beginning of the year, there where the halacha is that if a watchman says, I'm going to pay it, I don't want to swear, even if he doesn't have to pay, if the thing he's watching is stolen or it's lost, and he doesn't have to pay for it, but he decides he's going to pay, we know the halacha is that he gets the kefel. So the question that Rava was asking Rav Nachman here is, how could you tell the watchman to give the rings back to the owner when he found them? Isn't it like the case of the kefel? When the rings went up in value, that extra value that the rings are now worth should go to the watchman, because the watchman paid. Just like in the case of the Mishnah, the watchman paid and he gets the kefel. Here too, the watchman paid because his palace was taken away from him. So he should just keep the rings even though they go up in value. It should be like the kefel. That was Rava's question to Rav Nachman. However, Rava continues his story and he says, Velo ahader li, and he didn't answer me. Rav Nachman didn't answer my question when I asked it, probably because it wasn't a good question. And Rava explains, V'shaper avid delo ahader li. It's a good thing that he didn't answer me. My taima, what's the reason? Because my question was not really a good question. There's a very big difference between the case of the Mishnah, of the beginning of Hamafkid, and this case of the rings. Why? Hasam lo atrechei leveidina. Over there by the Mishnah, he didn't make him toil to go to court. The watchman was just nice enough to pay, even though he didn't have to, and he didn't make the owner go to court at all. So the owner, of course, is happy to give him the kefel if the thief is found. Hacha atrechei lebeidina. But here, the watchman was not so nice. The watchman made him toil to bring him to court. So here, it makes sense that the owner would not want the watchman to get the extra value of those rings. Speaking of returning the rings and returning the palace, the Gemara now wants to know the following. Lemeimra, do you mean to say, the Savar of Nachman, that Rav Nachman holds, the Shuma Hadar, that evaluations can be returned? Are you telling me by the fact that Rav Nachman said, return the rings and return the palace, that means that property that was taken as an evaluation, when somebody doesn't want to pay what they're supposed to pay, what Bezdin tells them to pay, if Bezdin seizes land, you're going to tell me that that land can be returned later? The Gemara says, Shiny Hassam. No, there it's different. You can't prove from the case of Rav Nachman that evaluations can be returned, because the case of the rings over there, it's different. Shiny Hassam. There it's different. Deshuma betaos hava. The evaluation, when Rav Nachman seized that palace from the watchman, it was an evaluation that was a mistake. Shuma betaos hava. It was an evaluation that was a mistake. The kahavi kipi mei kara, because the rings were originally there. The rings were just lost maybe in his drawer somewhere, but the rings were really there, so the palace should not really have been taken in the first place. I mean, it should have, because they didn't know where the rings were, and he had to be paid, so Rav Nachman took the palace. But in the end, when the rings were found, he had the rings the whole time, you see that that evaluation, in retrospect, if you look back at it, the evaluation was a mistake, and that kind of an evaluation does return. But you cannot see from here that any evaluation needs to be returned if the person wants to pay back the money. Well, the Gemara now has a discussion about that. What is the halacha about evaluations? Do they have to be returned if the person from whom they were taken now has enough money and wants to pay back for it? So, Amri Nahardai, they said in Naharda, Shuma Hadar ad Tresa Yarcheshata. Evaluations do have to be returned until 12 months' time. The Amar Ameimar, and Ameimar said, Ana minaharda ana. I am from Naharda, I am. V'svira li, and I hold Shuma Hadar La'ola, that evaluations always have to be returned. The Hilchasa, and the halacha is Shuma Hadar La'olam. Indeed, like Ameimar just said, evaluations do have to be returned forever. Why? Mishum shenemar, because it says in the Torah, Ve'asisa hayashar ve'hatov. You should do what is right and what is good, which basically means that here you have a person whose property was taken because he couldn't pay. Well, if the person who got the property was really expecting to get money, and he only took the property because the person didn't pay, but now later he wants his property back because now he has money to pay, and he wants to pay, and he wants to get his property back, the Torah, which says, Ve'asisa hayashar ve'hatov, you should do what is right and what is good, that means that it's only the right, the nice, the proper thing to return this person's property back to him now that he wants to pay what he was supposed to pay originally. That's what the Torah means when it says, Ve'asisa hayashar ve'hatov. We learn from that you should always return a property that is taken if the person is able to now pay for it and he wants to get his property back, you should give it back to him. So the Gemara now has a few questions about specific cases where we took property. Pshita, it's obvious, Shamulei lebalchov, if they evaluated a property for the owner of a debt, the azal ihu, and that person who got the property because somebody owed him money and let's say they wouldn't pay, so he owned that person's debt and instead took property, and he goes, v'azal ihu, and he goes, v'shamal balchov didei, and he evaluates the property for the owner of his debt. That means he owed somebody else some property, and he didn't have any money to pay him back, so he took this property and he gave it to the person who he owed money to pay off his debt. So it's obvious in that case that if the original person who didn't have the money and the first person took his property, and now that property goes to the second Baal Chov, the second owner of a debt, it's obvious, Amrinan Le, we say to him, to the second owner of the debt, we say to him, Lo adif at, you are no better, migavra de asas mine, from the man from where it came. In other words, that person where the property came from was an owner of debt of the first guy, and we said before, Asisa Hayashar Ve'atov teaches us that Shuma Hadr La'olam, evaluations are always returned. So if that person would have wanted to get his evaluation back, you would have had to do that. So now the second person is no better than that person. The second Baal Chov, the second owner of the debt, who got the property from the first owner of the debt, he's no better. So of course, if the original person who owed the money now has enough money to pay and wants to get his property back, so we say that the second owner of the debt also has to give back the property. The halacha of Shuma Hadr La'olam applies there also. However, in the following three cases, we are going to see that it does not apply. What are the three cases? Zavna, if he sold it. So again, all these three cases start out the same as the first case, where somebody was owed money, and the person who owed the money wouldn't pay, so he seized his property. What happens if he then sells it to somebody else? Zavna, he sells it, or Urta, he inherits it, meaning he dies and his sons get the property now. Or third case, V'yahava b'matana, if he gives it to somebody as a gift. So in all those three cases, where the first person who got the property, then either he sells it, or he inherits it, or he gives it as a gift, Vadai hanimi kara, certainly these people originally, adaita da'ara nachis, they were intending to receive land, v'lav adaita dezuzi nachis, and they were not intending to receive money. So, unlike the first case, where the second Baal Chov, the second owner of a debt, he was planning on getting money, because that's what the person owed him, is money, and instead he got property. So we say, okay, you were only expecting money, and now he wants his property back. You got property, you wanted money, he's willing to give you money, so the only right, proper thing is just to give the property back, and you'll get the money. But in these three cases, where he either sells it, inherits it, or gives it as a gift, so those three people, the person buying, the person inheriting, and the person who receives the gift, they all were assuming that they were going to get land, not money. So now that the original person wants the land back and wants to give money, they do not have an obligation of the Asisa Hayashar V'atov to return that property.